Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this full authority meeting today, Friday, June the 17th. I'm going to do the call to order, and first of all, we'll do the roll call, and I will turn to Mr. Bible.
Good morning, everyone. Looking for attendance from Member Beatty. I see him there.
I'm here.
I have regrets from Member Brady, and Member Clark. Member Cridland.
Present.
Member Fior.
Good morning.
Member Halinga.
Present.
And regrets from Member Hewson, Member Ingrao. Member Johnson.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Member Kaywall.
Here.
And Member McKenzie.
Present.
Vice Chair Metcalf.
Present.
Member Rapley.
Present online.
And I have regrets from Member Shurton, Member Steele, Member Smith,
Yes.
and now Member Steele.
Here.
Member Woodhouse,
Present.
Member Wright,
Present.
and of course, Chair Foster.
And I am also present. Before we begin, we'll do our declaration. The Niagara Peninsula watershed is situated within the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Adirondack, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississauga of the Credit, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, number 3, 4, and 381, and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the watershed is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Through the 2021 to 2031 strategic plan, we reconfirm our commitments to shared stewardship of natural resources and deep appreciation of Indigenous culture and history in the watershed. We do have our agenda in front of us. Are there any requested changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, Member Cridland, would you move that we accept that? And Member Steele, would you second that, please? Is there anyone opposed to us with the agenda in front of us? Thank you. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest this morning? Hearing or seeing none, let us move into our next section, which is the approval of previous minutes. And it's the minutes of the full authority meeting dated May the 20th, 2022. Member Ingrao, would you please move that we accept those minutes? And Member Metcalf, would you please second that? Are there any questions or comments to the minutes? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to us accepting these minutes? Thank you very much. We will move into the chair's update. So first of all, for those of you that were able to make it to our small event that we had this past week at Bench Brewery, thank you very much for showing up. I want to thank Rebecca and the entire team for the organization of the evening. It was very good. We had various members from our PAC. We had various members, in fact, all of the members from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Foundation. We also had a number of us as board members. Plus also we had a number of previous donors that we have had for the NPCA/Foundation. It was a very good evening of discussion, and I got to tell you, it was very good to sort of be in that environment and being outdoors and everybody having really just a good discussion evening about conservation and what we're doing here in Niagara. So anyway, I just want to thank staff for all the work that they did with that and for everyone who was able to show up. There have been not a lot of issues that have required my input in the last little while. Our CAO, of course, will talk about items when we get to her report later on in the meeting. So Anyway, that's it for my update today. Let's move on to correspondence, and there is none. And now let's move into presentations. So our first presentation this morning is a PowerPoint presentation by Robert Orland from Orland Conservation concerning land securement strategy for 2023 and 2022 and 2023. With that, Robert, please go ahead. I'm sorry, and we'll go to the CAO first.
Thank you, Chair Foster, and good morning, board members. On behalf of our staff team, I'm really pleased to present our draft land securement strategy and associated presentation today. If you recall, board input was obtained early in the process, and recently completed strategic plan provided the required direction and context to complete this work. It was a big undertaking, as you can tell, and truly a collaborative effort across divisions. We are seeking board endorsement to allow staff to solidify collaborations and partnerships in support of implementing this project. Additionally, this puts us in a very good position to proactively address one of the Conservation Authority Act transition requirement of developing a land securement and disposition policy. I would like to take a minute to introduce our consultant and presenter today, and our staff team and myself will take questions for the report. Mr. Robert Orland is the president of Orland Conservation with over 30 years of experience. His firm provides land securement expertise and conservation services towards long-term environmental health and biodiversity protection. Robert began his career as an environmental planner with Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority before specializing in land securement with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. He has facilitated and advised on the protection and stewardship of over 10,000 acres of, 100,000 will be nice, Robert, 10,000 acres of environmentally significant land in Canada in partnership with municipalities, government agencies, several Ontario conservation authorities, land trust, and non-profit organizations. Thank you, Robert, for working with our staff team, and please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chandra. And thank you to the chair and to the board. Pleasure to work on this project. First off, I think it's always prudent for me to distinguish between land securement and land procurement. With land procurement, I think most people understand what that means. It's the acquisition of land. And with what you can acquire, you can also dispose of. So land securement is a very important distinction because this implies that this land that would be acquired or would be protected in some fashion will be secured in perpetuity. So that distinction is going to carry forward through the rest of the strategy in this presentation. So the objectives of the strategy were to secure public green space in the watershed using very clear and concise decision making so that you know what you're going to accept and what you would have to decline at certain times with limited resources. Also to collaborate with municipal partners, land trusts, stakeholders, indigenous communities on mutual land stewardship goals. Following that, also the implementation of sustainable and innovative financial models so that you're going to be able to support a program going forward and securement projects as well. So why are we doing this? Well, within your watershed, you're part of the Carolinian Lake Zone. And throughout Canada, this is the most delicate area when it comes to biodiversity, with less than 3% of this delicate landscape being protected. Within your own watershed, there's only 56% of what science recommends for a healthy landscape. So there is a ways to go. And with national and international guidelines, we're looking at hopefully saving more than 500 rare species, protecting drinking water within southern Ontario for 11 million people, and to boost climate resiliency. And with new changes and recommendations that have come forward internationally and nationally, we're hoping throughout Canada to protect 30% by 2030. And that would be extrapolated down to every area. So within your own watershed, ideally, you would want to protect 30% by 2030. But as we go forward, you'll see that is a very lofty goal. And at this time, we also have to acknowledge that we have to accommodate some incredible growth that is expected. With the most recent amendment to provincial growth plans, we expect within your watershed significant growth by 2051. So how do we do this? First of all, when looking at any strategy, we have to know the starting point. So what have you secured right now? A map in your watershed shows all the secured areas just by NPCA. And that equates to almost 3,000 hectares, which is only 1.22% of the watershed. So again, a long way to go. Thankfully, you have some partners. When we take a look at all the other partners and what they've secured in the area, it adds another 1,000 hectares of land, boosting it to 1.64% of the watershed. Again, a long way to go, but at least there is some support and you're not in it alone. And as you can see, NPCA is the dominant land securement partner of all the partners within your watershed. You hold the most land, and it's the highest percentage of the watershed then, obviously. So you do have some of these other partners and more partners that have yet to secure land, but they are becoming more active in the area, and I think that will garner even more support. So really the crucial stakeholder in all of this is a landowner. And landowners really don't know that NPCA is an option. I can guarantee you that. Everywhere I've gone throughout Ontario, landowners don't always know what all their options are when disposing of their land. And it's incumbent upon us to be able to inform them what kind of options they have. So most landowners know the obvious ones. Well, I can sell it. Or I can leave it to my kids. But in all my dealings, over 20 years dealing with landowners across Ontario, I can tell you that those conservation-minded landowners that just want to leave a legacy do not trust their children. And I imagine that some of you can think of why. So what are the options that we give landowners to consider? Because it all comes down to them. This is a voluntary type of program. So we look at the broad ones, and the broad ones are an obvious one, land donation. They can simply donate their land to NPCA and get a tax receipt for that. Very simple. Many people would love the opportunity to leave legacy. And in that previous slide, you can see the demographics of the people that typically do that are people in their retirement years. They have lived on their land for quite a long time, and they really want to know it's going to be protected. And some people will choose to bequeath the land to the Conservation Authority. And those people that I've come across, sometimes I give them another option that they hadn't considered before that makes more sense to them, and that is a life interest agreement. It acts as a land donation and bequest at the same time of when they want to do it versus waiting until death. And in that way, they know it's secured up front. They get to continue to use the property the way they're using it now without any interference by NPCA because it's in an agreement. And then once they're done with the property, everything is transferred with regards to responsibility and management of the property to NPCA. Another attractive option for some landowners is a direct conveyance because, and another word for it is a conservation severance. So that could be, a landowner could have 40 hectares of land and is living on the land and is not ready to donate the land or sell the land to NPCA. So what can be offered to them is the ability to say, well, we can carve the land so that you reside in one area of the land. You may retain whatever you want. Is it 2 hectares, 5 hectares? And then we could acquire the rest from you. So that option is not often always known by landowner. And when presented to them, they might choose that option. Now, there are landowners that are very conservation minded, but they may be land rich and cash poor. So they just can't afford to donate the land to NPCA. So the other very attractive option to them is what's called a split receipt. And all that is they can choose to receive some cash for the property and the rest of that in a tax receipt. And that can be a 50-50 split, it can be 60-40, whatever is negotiated. But it's a very attractive option for some landowners. And then there's the conservation easement agreement. Now this is unique in the sense that the land would not come to NPCA in title. NPCA instead holds an agreement that is registered on title, and that agreement is made with the landowner at that time to act as a negative covenant on title, so that there are restrictions that the landowner wants to place on the property so that future landowners cannot breach those restrictions and basically destroy the land that they've come to love. And they know that the Conservation Authority is there to monitor those restrictions and to ensure that the land stays as they wanted it to be. And then, of course, the last option would be a purchase. Now, when we're talking about any of the donation options that I mentioned, there is a federal program in place that's administered by Environment Canada and Climate Change, and this has been in place for over 2 decades now. And the advantages here for landowners are rewards from a tax perspective. So first of all, there is 0 capital gains tax payable on any land donation when going through this program, as opposed to not going through the program. So that's an obvious advantage. Secondly, is when the property is appraised, which is a requirement of the program, and Environment Canada has a panel of appraisers that do a peer review of every appraisal, they allow for the landowner to use 100% of their tax receipt, so 100% of the inclusion rate. And then lastly, which is also very important because not too many landowners can utilize a large tax receipt all in 1 year. It can be spread out over 10 years. And especially, as I mentioned before, landowners that wish to donate these lands are often in their retirement years. So when they're on a pension income, having a big tax receipt in 1 year is not that helpful. So that makes a bit of an advantage here. In the eligibility criteria of eco-gifts, everything you see on this map here would be automatically eligible. And these are your ESAs, your areas of natural and scientific interest, your wetlands that have been designated. They're an automatic eligibility within the program. And beyond that, there are going to be areas that would be acceptable by eco-gifts as well, beyond what you see colored in here. They could be excellent restoration site potentials. They can be areas within a watershed plan that say we should be securing these. And all you have to do is present that to eco-gifts, and they're usually very willing to accept these lands. Now, ideally, we would like to see everything on this map that's colored in secured, but that's not realistic. We know that going forward. It's too much with limited resources. So what we have to do is develop some criteria. So in the strategy, what we did is, first of all, is it worthy? That's the main thing right off the bat. Does it fit within your criteria of ecological and physical science being the determining factors of is a property worthy of NPCA protecting? And there's going to be lots, as you've seen in the previous map, that would be considered worthy. But the next is it worth it? Not every property you're going to want to secure because it's not going to be necessarily your best bang for the buck. So when it comes to parcel size, as an example, bigger is better when you're talking of land securement. A 1 hectare parcel versus a 40 hectare parcel costs about the same in securement costs. The legal fees are the same, appraisal costs are the same. So you might as well get more property for what you're trying to do. The method of securement, is it going to be a conservation easement? Is it going to be a purchase? Is it going to be a donation? This will all feed into whether or not it's going to be worth it for you to do. And of course, the cost of stewardship. Is it far away from existing sites you're already managing? Do you have to pay taxes on it? These kind of questions will determine if you can, if you're going to accept a donation of land or consider a purchase of land. So what we wanted to do, because limited time and resources are a factor, we want to just identify some areas that we would do some targeted outreach to landowners and to let them know. You could do some broad outreach in the sense of posting some page on your website saying we're interested in talking to you about your ecologically sensitive land and securing it. But when it comes down to doing more direct landowner outreach with limited time and resources, we had to focus on some areas. So we pinpointed some areas that are expanding existing conservation areas. So growing the nodes of your existing areas, that keeps your management costs down. Your ecological and physical science is there to support, if it's worthy, to increase your nodes of protection. And there's going to be some geographic dispersity here. So we have more coverage within the watershed, and more people within the watershed have access to some of these areas that are going to be growing. And you can see here that if everyone within these areas were interested, you'd secure another 10,000 almost hectares, but obviously that's not realistic. We had to take a look at what the parcel sizes and took into account various factors to determine, looking at these areas, where we should proceed with landowner outreach. And we had to create some targets as a result of that, so that we know if we're creating success or not. So when considering that the average parcel size was around 20 hectares, give or take, and my experience throughout the province doing landowner contact is maybe you might get a lot of people interested, like could be 50%, but then 10%-ish might be really interested in proceeding with something. For a number of factors later through the process, maybe a few more filter out, and you'll get maybe 5% or less than 5 ultimately secured, which might equate to about 1 or 2 properties per year that you'd be securing. And I'm going to stress that this is a minimum target. You may find that a lot more people are interested than you have capacity for, and that's a good problem to have. So when doing landowner outreach, we have to develop some communication materials so that we know why we're contacting them. We have to have the contact list to begin with as well, so we would have to create that. It's good to always know the audience. Are you talking to a farmer? Are you talking to a landowner a retirement age versus a young family? These are important things, knowing going into your audience, and of course getting warm leads. But there's all different ways of doing landowner contact that have shown to be effective, and this goes into more detail in the strategy. Warm introductions are among the best, though, and it's really important to try and get as many people interested as possible through warm introductions. So you have on your staff stewardship people that have already done tree planting programs or restoration with landowners who are obviously very conservation minded. So they want to do more work on the property or secure it possibly. So that's a great introduction. But board members yourselves, I'm sure you can think of some people already within your areas that are probably likely candidates to at least listen to some information. And then once you have some people donating lands or donating conservation easements, they become champions on your behalf, and they start introducing you to more neighbors. So taking a look at the costs, there's of course the program cost, which could be considered relatively nominal. You have to develop communication materials for landowner outreach. And then some time really is what it comes down to. Staff time to be able to go out and contact these landowners and then process or keep the program administered. But then the more interesting cost would be the securement project cost. And even if a piece of land is donated, there's usually costs between, and I put a range 16 and 43,000, and that's just because of certain things that are always going to be there. You're always going to have to pay for an appraisal, legal costs, almost always for a survey, sometimes for environmental assessment, and other potential costs. So that is another reason why you don't want to accept any offer that comes to you. There's always a cost that comes to it, and the selection process is very important to make sure you're spending your money wisely. I'm turning back to securement partners now because, as I said earlier, you're not alone in this. So there is some funding available through the feds and the province with regards to land securement. Some of it can be directly accessible by NPCA, and some of it would have to be indirectly accessible by partnering with a land trust. And of course, there's municipalities, indigenous organizations that can be contacted as well. And so many people and so many organizations can have their benefits going forward. They can help you receive donations. In some cases, a landowner may say, I'd rather donate to this organization rather than you. And that's still good because ultimately you're getting more land secured. And some of these organizations can help you manage and steward the property or help process applications for you. Now, the next steps is if this strategy is approved, we want to implement the following this year. We want to circulate the document to some of these other partners and organizations for their feedback and support, and also to develop the land securement program, which would include a budget for the program, reaching out to the landowners with appropriate materials, developing that contact list, which takes a little bit of time, and allocating staff resources to do so. And then once you have that, we're probably going to see some more happy landowners because of those people that really want the ability to leave a land legacy, and they can be champions on your behalf. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm open to questions if any. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Excellent presentation. Awful lot of information to absorb from this, in particular in this area. Are there any questions from any members of committee to the presentation? I don't see anyone having any. Okay, there's a couple coming up. So let's start with Member Woodhouse, and then we'll go to Member McKenzie. Member Woodhouse, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question in terms of the cost, you identified the process of actually completing a transaction and the costs associated with it. I would suspect this would be maybe one of the areas that the foundation could help us with. And along those lines, I'm thinking of people's property that backs onto water courses that, is basically forested and not used. Is there a way of securing some form of control over that without actually incurring the extensive legal costs as you've identified? And what I'm thinking of is along the 12 Mile Creek Basin, for example. There's a lot of properties that actually go right down into what is now Ontario Hydro property, OPG property. Is there value in doing that, or does it justify that control, or is it properties that likely will never be threatened anyway, and we're probably just best to leave them? Could you talk a bit about that, please?
Go ahead, Rob.
Through you. Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So with regards to securing the land versus, through acquisition versus conservation easement could be talked about here, or through conservation severance or direct conveyance. Those lands, I've always found that it's better to be able to secure the land so you know it's protected in perpetuity. In some areas, you may decide in that selection process that it's so isolated and the threat is so low, we don't need to secure it. So I think that'll come down to a case-by-case basis, because you do want to be efficient with your resources, and you want to, as you see projects coming up, you want to be able to prioritize those projects. So those areas that might be backing on to a creek, as you're saying, if they're so isolated that there's really no threat, then you might want to just rely on policy to protect that. But I'd point out that policy is not considered always that reliable. Policies change, staff change, politicians change, and parties change, and therefore policies can change over longer periods of time. So if there's any possibility that you feel that properties might not be secured, then you're probably better off to just secure it and get it done. Taking into account the selection criteria again, is it worth it and is it worthy? Those are the two aspects you have to consider. And I think if staff were to review that and then present to the board with a recommendation one way or the other, I think that's probably a reliable way of doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up question, if I could?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. So for example, and I'll pose this scenario to you. There's along the 12-mile creek basin, there's a number of residential properties that are on the crest of the basin itself. And a lot of those people maybe, or not a lot, a number of them may be interested in deeding their property to the NPCA for the reason that I've spoken earlier. The question is that would the NPCA be in a position to acquire those kind of donations, number one, but it actually entails having a house on it, and then later severing the house from the environmental portion of it that's down into the valley, and then selling the house. Is that seen as a as an alternative? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. To be very, very quick. So there's very many options when it comes right down to securing land, and a lot of it is taking the list of options that I've presented you in this presentation that we present to landowners, and it becomes a myriad of combinations of options sometimes to suit the landowner best, and the conservation authority. It has to suit you as well and how you're securing the land as well as the landowner. So you could have combinations of things to secure the land. But yes, it does very much make sense to see that happen. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Member Woodhouse. And anything else you wish to add at this point? Are you good?
No, that's helpful, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have Member McKenzie and then Member Cridlin. Member McKenzie, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Foster, and through you to our guest today, Mr. Orland. Mr. Orland, in your draft strategy here report, you indicate 6 securement areas. From what I observed is that none of these are near large population centers. And the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, except in a few small examples, does not own lands close to where the large population centers are. Can you give us a reason as to why securement areas were a securement area or securement areas were not identified near where the population centers are? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. It's a very good question. What we find with any land securement program is momentum is a very important factor in getting a program really popularized and well funded. So trying for the low-hanging fruit is often the best strategy. So some of these areas are going to be cheaper in the more rural areas, as you can imagine, less expensive if you have to purchase them. But also the science is really more there because there's less encroachment, and also there's less stewardship costs associated with some of these more rural areas when you're building on the existing nodes of your existing conservation areas, rather than some of the securement issues that might incur when you're bordering more densely populated areas. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't be doing that in the more accessible areas from a human population perspective. Absolutely. I think you ultimately do want to go there. Part of this is just to get that momentum going and that snowball effect so that as the snowball goes down the hill, you're getting more interest in the localized communities and more media attention. You might have some celebrations as well, which can bring out more of the media and politicians and other landowners. And then you start spreading your program throughout the watershed more strategically. So for the first 10 years, it was recommended that we focus on these 6 areas just to do landowner outreach. But that does not mean landowner outreach cannot occur in other areas of the watershed during that time where you may start seeing so much success in the areas that we've identified in the report, and you could have saturated those areas. You may start to say, well, let's look at some of these other areas. So I hope that answers your question. I do understand where you're coming from, and I think ultimately you do want more people visiting these areas, and if they're more accessible to more people, there's an advantage there as well. So didn't want to exclude those areas, but we had to draw a line somewhere to say there's going to be limited time and resources. Let's just focus on what we will consider the top 6 right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member McKenzie. Member Cridland.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to the presenter. Thank you for this presentation. A lot of information, maybe for some of us like me, that's it's a little bit new. So I'm just, I liked when you highlighted the board role and was listening closely to what you provided us in the presentation. I just wondered if you see perhaps having like a board package or a board communication or a board education tool that might fall out early. Some of us may not be here in January, but something that would be available for a board to engage to the level that they'd like to engage, especially if this is new subject matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the communication materials that are recommended to be provided or developed within this year, those are the materials that should probably be given to board members as well. And what you want to be ultimately doing is facilitating a meeting with a landowner and the appropriate staff person to engage them. You could be present at that meeting, or you can just make the meeting happen on their behalf. Giving too much information at the forefront is not always a good thing. We used to develop landowner communication materials that would be very extensive in the explanations of what all the landowner options are. And what I found was more effective is to not provide that much information. You need to provide enough for them to be interested, but not enough that they can look at the information and say, okay, I think I know what this is all about, and I don't think I need to meet with anyone or see anyone. Because ultimately, we do want the foot in the door kind of meeting where we can explain in more detail, which we can't explain in too much detail in a pamphlet. But having a meeting, whether it's face-to-face or virtual with a landowner, or at least a telephone conversation with them, to go over what their needs are, what their expectations are, what they would like. Would they really appreciate having a legacy? How that works? That's the kind of meeting that builds really good trust and rapport, and that's what we would hope to accomplish with any kind of meeting. So I think as your role as a board member in this capacity would be to help facilitate that meeting and give the same handout that a landowner would be getting anyway. That would be my my recommendation.
Member Chris?
Thank you for the clarification.
Chair, it's Bill Rapley. Trying to get your attention.
Just a second, Bill. Just hold on.
Okay.
Member Cridland, anything else?
No, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you. So Member Rapley, you want to say something, and also Member Halinga. So go ahead, Member Rapley.
Yeah, sir, I was away earlier this week, and we had the 50+1 anniversary of my graduation from OVC, the Ontario Vet College, 1971. So, but I think it's important to get in the mix here of this report and the other report, the potential partnership or activity at Shoreline Park in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I'm a member of the Harmony group there, and there's a lot of discussion on this, and it sat there for a few years with COVID. The Parks Canada is the main player there. The Conservation Authority works with the streams 1 Mile Creek to 4 Mile Creek coming up to the Lakeshore Road. However, and the town is very interested in some of the area there, and we have the restoration of the sewage lagoons in process. So this stuff is heating up, but there were reports that Parks Canada was having serious financial issues. And it may be, I just want to get it into the mix that perhaps we need to start having more discussions with them. This would be a tremendous opportunity for the future and to keep it ecologically good, and for the nature clubs are all interested. So I just wanted to table that, make sure it got in the mix. I didn't see it mentioned in the larger report that follows. Okay?
Yeah,
so it's the Niagara Shores or Shoreline Park, and it's 4 Mile Creek right over to 2 Mile Creek.
Okay, thank you, Member Rapley. Just for everyone on the board and just to make sure that our governance process behaves the way that it's supposed to, I gave a little leeway with Member Woodhouse and also with you, Member Rapley, sort of going into topics other than what was on the presentation. This point in time is to be asking questions to the presentation and the presenter on what it is that he's provided. There is a report coming up later where we can discuss in more detail some of these other items. So with that, Member Halinga, please go ahead.
Thank you, and I'm going to turn my video off to save bandwidth. What I see, my observation would be that we already have a door partly ajar when applications for development come in adjacent to significant properties, provincially significant wetlands. We have the development in Niagara Falls. We've got a mining proposal in Port Colborne adjacent to provincially significant lands. And there is an opportunity, as I see it, that we could, since they can't develop that property, that we could seek securement of that property if it is worthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Halinga. Seeing no more questions at this point, Mr. Orland, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. I'm going to ask a Member Fior to move and Member Wright to second that we receive this presentation this morning. Is there anyone opposed to us receiving the presentation? We're good. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.
Our second presentation this morning is a PowerPoint presentation by Jeff Ricade, the Senior Manager, Integrated Watershed Planning and Information Management. Do you wish to say something first? No. This time it's straight to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everybody hear me while I start sharing my screen?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Thank you. Great. So, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to be with you today to share about our recent completion of the digital terrain model update and our releasing that on our open data site. Just a little bit before we begin, we need to briefly touch on the difference between digital elevation and terrain models, because like my dad would say, these things are probably exactly the same but different. A DM is typically coarser and more generalized in terms of a real-world representation than a DTM, which supplements a regular elevation point spacing with select mapping features akin to natural terrain such as rivers and ridges. It's this additional mapping features that make the DTM product so indispensable to NPCA business, and I hope by the end of today's presentation that would be clear. The 2020 DTM update that we are sharing with you today, the DTM is derived using stereo models from the NPCA recent digital aerial imagery acquisition, which we do in partnership with the province. So we also get the individual images when we get that orthophotography, which have the forward lap and the side lap to look at it traditionally in a stereo environment. Now that's all digital, and it provides for really cool collection capabilities in that 3D environment. We originally acquired this DTM in 2002 during the advent of one of our first orthoimagery partnerships. Toronto Region Conservation Authority was part of that partnership at the time, on behalf of a lot of the CAs also at the table. They made sure the accompanying DTM would be capable of supporting floodplain mapping needs. Over the years, we've ourselves and local partners have maintained it to various geographies or qualities of scope. Appreciating its value to our business with water resources and our regulatory needs, in 2010, when we did update it, we specifically required change detection around the hydrology-related terrain. In 2020, this was no different. That change detection around hydrology scope or features was in scope, and the consultant was referenced to use the MNR large-scale hydrographic mapping specs as a guide, or specifications as a guide. It should be noted that these specs support typical land use planning scale mapping needs, which is more large scale. Comparatively, Ontario-based mapping and a lot of the information derived from those in provincial mapping is medium scale at 1 to 10,000. So this stuff is set up to support, as the slide dictates, your pre-engineering survey and design needs, municipal planimetric mapping, detailed topo, minimum scale of 1 to 2,000, which means we're zoomed in a lot closer, there's more detail, and obviously supporting a 1 meter contour, which is the tie into the floodplain mapping specs. This stuff is essentially the best you can get before you have to get on site with surveying equipment, such as a total station level or a differential GPS. At the end of the day, it's got a 90% confidence interval when it comes to the contours. And the surface itself, if you were to click down on it and get an elevation value on it, that elevation value will be absolutely within half a meter from what the real world positioning is. This is an example of the components that I'll make it up. So what you're witnessing in the screen here is the break lines and the points that get pulled out of it in the 3D environment. So you can kind of see that more on the left of the image over top of the photography. And you can see that those break lines are color coded by different thematic types, which lend itself to future mapping needs as source material. But you can also see on the right how when this stuff is interpolated, it creates a continuous elevation surface that meets those mapping specs. And you can see the elevation surface represented by what we call a color ramp. So you're going from the high values in the grays to your low values on the in the teals and the greens there down in the valley. So one thing you can also get a notice of here is that those break lines have a really big influence on the terrain surface, and as a result, the contours as well. Obviously, we're looking at the Balls Falls site here, and you can see the 20 Valley jumping right out at you, and you can also see over on the imagery side, there's break lines even representing the Switchback Trail from the Center for Conservation down into the Valley Land. And again, that is there to make sure that it meets that 1 meter contour support, but also so that anywhere you click down on it, you get a value within half a meter of the real world. We also included building footprints in the project scope for Haldimand. Building footprints information is essential for flood risk and assessment exercises. The region of Niagara and City of Hamilton have pretty current building footprint data sets and traditionally maintain those, but we had a gap in Haldimand County, so we took the opportunity to collect that while the operators were in the stereo environment. An additional component to this study was enhancing the quality control and assurance and the confidence in it. So we used previous ground control data sets that have qualified and quantified the accuracy achievements of the previous versions of it, but we added to that and amended an additional 104 points in a new independent ground control data set to complement it. So we actually had 565 points contributing to it this time in the final linear map accuracy standard, which is the industry standard to evaluate this stuff with, is up to 0.38 meters. So it's clearly well below the half meter requirement here. So we've got a lot of confidence in it, and we've demonstrated that. The final report also is stamped by a certified and professional Ontario land surveyor. So in terms of applications, obviously, like I mentioned, this stuff is really important for floodplain mapping. The DTM is used to characterize the hydrology and the hydraulic models, including the cross sections. The cross sections are extracted right out from it to go into the hydraulic model, so it reduces the amount of prep for those models. And its output, which is a calculated flood surface, is intersected with the terrain surface to determine the flood extents, which provides for a more accurate flood line than manual interpretations. In this example, at least on these two cross sections, I'm hoping you're seeing my mouse move around a little bit. The flood level is just a little bit, a hair past 175 meters elevation, and you can actually see that where the flood line is being plotted, just a hair past the 175 meter contour. As I mentioned earlier as well, the break lines are a mapping source for a lot of our needs, and when it comes to our tops and toes of slopes for riverine valley hazards, it's no different. They are absolutely essential for this. The elevation surface and contours also help determine valley wall heights and thresholds, and the elevation surface, when we classify it by slope, further helps assess the wall stability conditions. So very important for that part of our hazard mapping as well. In the same vein, the DTM is essential to determining Great Lakes flood levels, wave uprush extents, toes and top of slope features, instability for associated erosion hazards along the Great Lakes shorelines. This example that I've thrown in here actually further demonstrates the need to regularly update this stuff, the terrain model and the hazard data, because you can observe here the regulatory lines produced in 2011 are now with respect to the 2020 imagery. There's lots of erosion going on, and there's many examples of this along both coasts. As mentioned, detection efforts were emphasized around hydrology features, considering the break lines are the source material for our large-scale watercourse mapping. This inventory is designed to also hydrologically reinforce the elevation model to support those water resource applications. such as the delineation of drainage basins. The DTM is so detailed that some roadside ditches are included in the surface water inventory for that because they exert a controlling influence on surface flows, and we actually have municipal infrastructure carrying draws and ephemeral water courses across roads in a lot of cases, so that needs to be reflected. And actually an update to this large-scale surface water inventory is being scoped for procurement through this year's capital budget now that the DTM update, which it's functionally dependent upon, is now complete. So we'll actually be updating this derivative shortly now that this DTM's done. The DTM is ultimately the source material that enables the potential to develop a complete water resources data infrastructure fully capable of both steady state and numeric hydrologic and hydraulic modeling support. This example demonstrates the network drainage system comprising of catchments and surface water features that know their upstream and downstream relationships for those cumulative type studies. So really important base data. The derivative digital elevation model is ideal for many general topographic applications, including slope and aspect analysis. Display here is enhanced statistically using a histogram stretch to highlight the variability in the Niagara terrain despite its inherent flatness. So you can actually see in this image, and again, I'm hoping you're seeing my mouse, there's drumlins showing up out in Haldimand County there. There's other physiographic features such as the various moraines. You can also see that the Wainfleet Bog was once a domed peat bog. So you can see where it was once domed in the extraction effects. You can obviously the Font Hill Came jumping out. And then from an anthropogenic sense, you see the quarries popping out, the canal and its spoils as well. And the landfills are readily apparent too. So appreciating the broader community value of this product and for ease of administering a high demand for data requests, understanding its value to drawing preparation for development applications, we've made this available openly on our GIS data portal. So right now I'm going to jump into a quick demo of how that looks up there. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity for questions. So just bear with me as I go to the corporate website here. Can we confirm that we're seeing the corporate website for a moment?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. So when you go to the website, it's under services and the mapping link, which takes you to our open data portal. And you can see we've highlighted it kind of at the top of the page here before you get to the rest of our data sets. So we actually get to a whole individual page here where you get some information that is very similar to what I just shared with you or what's documented in the board report. As you can see, we've linked the technical report here as well. Oops. Well, I will fix that link because obviously it's not going where I want it to. But you can see now we have a viewing application as well. Once this fires up, this will help people reference which tiles of the product across the data set that they want. And once we get zoomed in close enough, because it's a pretty heavy data set, you see those break lines coming up for reference. So people, public partners, clients can actually pick the tile that they want for their need. And then you can see the individual data is available as well too. So we have it available in 2 industry-leading CAD data sets, which makes it really easy for engineering firms and design consultants to use the data. And it's a quick just jump out. Once they have the tiles they want, they can download them directly from here. And we also have some of the GIS derivatives, so they can actually grab that index and put it into their own GIS environment or spatial environment, as well as the break lines with the documentation in terms of what they are and aren't here, the contours as well. The continuous surface at 5 meters is available too, and we are including layer files which have the recommended symbology for it as well. And you can see on the website here, I tried to highlight a bunch of our properties. So Balls Falls is captured in the screen cap for the first 2 products here. Long Beach with the mass points, which are coming. The contours, I believe, are Rockaway. This is a zoom in of the Fonthill Came, and the Haldimand County building footprints is a hamlet in Haldimand. So again, all these buttons link to actually where people can download the data, and in the future we'll be augmenting this with web services, meaning they can consume the data right off of our GIS server without actually having to physically access that. So highly accessible and very self-serving for anybody who wants to consume this data for any of the needs that are out there. Again, appreciating the broader community value to this product beyond just the authority business. So I'm trying to find my way, whoops, back. There we go. I guess that's it. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. A few hands are popping up on the screen, so I'm going to start with Member Metcalf and then go to Member Woodhouse and then Member Steele. So please go ahead, Member Metcalf.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Just a quick question, Jeff. On page 13 of your presentation, you made mention of something, a feature in Haldimand County, and I didn't quite catch that. Could you reiterate that for me, please?
Yeah, so we, while the operators were in there updating the terrain model, we got them to capture building footprints in Haldimand County. So these are basically outlines of where there's all built structures on the landscape, like houses, barns, sheds, greenhouses, and all that stuff. And like I mentioned before, we have an interest in that from flood risk assessment studies.
Yeah, I've caught all that, but there was another feature. I'm looking at a map here on page
right.
13.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was you made mention of some type of feature on that map that in Haldimand County.
Yeah, through you, Chair, the features that I pointed out were drumlins. They're geological feature that are on the landscape. They're little hills all oriented towards the northwest. They are remained and deposited on the landscape when the ice sheets retreated. So they're an interesting thing to note. You see them a lot more around Peterborough, and there's a big drumlin field out there, but it was just interesting to point out that those pop out, and we do have some down here in Niagara. So it's just a little fun fact.
Great, thanks, Jeff. That clarified it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Metcalf. Let us go to Member Woodhouse. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question centers around the area of information transfer. From what I understand, this is accessible by any and everybody, which is great. Is there a possibility that these images, measurements, calculations, or anything that's shown in that information that's been transferred can be altered by anybody?
On a local copy that they download, for sure. Because it is data that they can bring into their systems and manipulate, but that's part of the point as well too. Again, a lot of this is source material for derivative mapping needs, like I detailed with respect to our business, but it's got community value for other people to do the same for whatever their needs are from topographic base information. So they could alter it, but we have the golden copy on the website. So as a source, people will know that the accurate stuff is here, and it's pretty standard with most organizations moving to open data that everybody's data is available openly, and this could happen. And again, that's why the terms and conditions in the agreement are on there as well too, so people are aware of what they can and can't do with the data and who's liable for what.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member Woodhouse. Let us go to Member Steele. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and through you to Jeff. Jeff, has this been or will it be rolled out to the municipal planning departments across Hamilton, Niagara, and Haldimand?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. That's why we've put it on open data. So in the past, we kept it not on open data, and we didn't really advertise it. But when the cat got out of the bag, we had a high demand for it. And it was less from municipalities, incidentally, but more from consultants working on behalf of development applications. Because again, like I said, this cuts down costs. You may have some answers before you have to get surveying information on site. So it was in high demand, and now it's self-serve, and we don't have to find the tiles that people want and then put them onto an FTP and transfer with a separate agreement. It just makes our administration, in terms of the sharing of this information to everybody, really easy through this open data site. And we'll be sharing news with the municipalities as well too, that this is now available on the open data site. So we'll follow up with communication to them that is the case.
Yeah, because I think that's perfect because of, just in my own municipality with the pre-consultations we have, even before we draw in the region or the NPCA or whoever, what other organization may have to be brought in. It's just more information we can provide to developers, farmers, somebody just building a house somewhere that's maybe affected by any of this mapping. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, great information. It just moves things along quicker, and I think it can give answers a lot faster with regards to whether somebody's going to proceed or not. Great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Steele. Member McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Chair Foster. Chair, this is not necessarily a question for staff, but it has to do with the subject. Is this an appropriate time to make a favorable comment?
We do have a report coming up on this, if you want.
I'll wait for that.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Quick comment, Jeff, from the chair. How strong? Oh gosh, I hope I put this right. What is the degree of confidence in the data that's coming out of this, from an overall point of view?
Well, it's not through you because I'm talking to you, but it's. We're highly confident. So it's met the industry standards, and we, for the spec that we prescribed it to. So the contours have the 90% confidence interval at the half-meter horizontal and vertical accuracy requirement, and like I said, we put an additional level of independent ground control into it this time, so we have a higher level of certainty than we've had in iterations of this product in the past. So very, very high confidence in it. Stamped by an Ontario Land Surveyor.
Okay, thank you very much. I just know from my past experience in the town of Lincoln, there's always been a mismatch between the NPCA and the town on some of the watershed up in the Camden area. So it'll be interesting as we start digging into this a little further. Thank you very much, Jeff, for your presentation this morning. With that, I would like to ask Member McKenzie to move and Member Woodhouse to second that we receive this report, this presentation. Is there anyone that's opposed to that? That is carried. Thank you very much, Jeff. Delegations, there are no delegations. We do have two consent items, and coincidentally, one of them is the digital terrain model update and open data release. So, Member McKenzie, I'm sure you'll have a comment on that. But let's accept these two reports together at this point in time. So I'm going to ask Member Wright to move that the two consent items be received, and Member Cridland, could you please second that? And with that, they're on the floor. Member McKenzie, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Foster. Just to help me here, we just have the opportunity of discussing the land securement report and the and Jeff's report now?
Currently, we're dealing with the digital terrain model, so it was Jeff's report. So,
okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much, and my compliments to Jeff and the team that's put this all together. As Member Steele has commented, what a valuable tool to the overall community. I would just ask staff and yourself, Chair Foster, that in upcoming discussions with the region and municipalities, that this service be highlighted when budgets are being discussed. So I think a significant investment of creative energy and financial contribution has gone to making this service available to the community. So I think it should be highlighted in any list that is discussed with the region or municipalities when we're discussing what does the NPCA do for you. Here's this tremendous tool, free to anybody in the community, and that should not be underestimated to its value. Thank you very much, Chair Foster.
Thank you very much, Member McKenzie. Are there any other questions or comments to any of these reports? I see a massive hand in front of Member Johnson, so please go ahead, Member Johnson.
Thank you. Good morning. And Jeff, I really appreciate your presentation. I heard a number of times that developers and consultants are using this system to help save money for themselves. And just to give you some context to my question, when I announced I was retiring, I'm sure all the developers in Hamilton were dancing in the streets. So is there a way, and it's too bad we can't find a way to have a fee based on those that are using it to save money or to make money? I don't know how we could ever do that, even if they have to take a membership out. I don't want to take away from the general public being able to use this, but it just, when I hear the developers and consultants are saving money in order to make money on developing land using the system, I kind of figure if there's a way we can tweeze them out and say, okay, well then if this is for your application, you press this button and then there's a fee involved. I don't know how to do it, but anyway, those are just my comments. Jeff, again, great presentation, fully supportive.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Member Wright, I saw your hand up briefly. Or did you wish to make a comment?
Actually, it was on the Morgan's Point report. I'm not sure if we're doing the two consent items together.
We are, yes, we are. So please go ahead.
Okay, on page 9, it's just, I think there's a correction needed on the in excess of financial implications. It's the project, it says additional costs of 897 in excess. I believe that should be 987 to match the number above. If you go to the actual page 9.
Yeah, thank you very much, Member Wright, and Mr. Bivol has that, and we'll correct it accordingly. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Cridland.
Thank you, through Chair. I just wanted to again highlight that this report is in the consent items today because it's Morgan's Point, and getting to this point in the exercise and coming forward already with a management plan is very positive. And I also wanted to just make a positive comment on the approach that we're doing for public outreach, in particular, reaching out to the neighbors in this particular, with this particular property. So I know they're very attached, I think, to the pollinator garden that's there, and I certainly look forward to the process that's going to unfold in Wainfleet with this particular project. So just wanted to thank staff on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cridland. I don't see any hands up at this point. So with that, is there anyone opposed to us receiving these two reports as consent items? I do not hear or see anything. With that, let us move forward to our discussion items this morning. The first discussion item is report number FAA 23-2022 concerning the Cave Springs Conservation Area Enhancement Project and update and award of contract for parking lot construction. Can I get Member Kaywall to move that, and can I get Member Beattie to second that, please? I think we're good. Mr. Christie, would you like to speak to this report, please?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. The report that we're chatting about is about enhancements to Cave Springs Conservation Area. This project was initiated through a real increase in visitation and traffic through the pandemic, and one of the areas we saw a major increase. So today we're talking about a few initiatives to enhance the property, which includes updating and completing the management plan for the property, including a parking area to support 16 vehicles, as well as updating the accessible trail, and to provide wayfinding and signage for the area, and as well as just the overall entrance signage for the property as well. Would happy to take any questions. This was funding came available through the Canadian Community Revitalization Fund, so we're pretty proud of this and excited to get this project going.
Thank you, Adam. Member Halinga, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. When we are looking at improvements to things such as parking lots, are we looking to alternatives for the type of pavement? Are we using an low impact development styles such as porous pavement, porous interlock, that type of thing, rather than hard surface with significant runoffs?
Director Christie.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, we are currently looking at all these objectives. A stormwater management plan was done for the area and taken into consideration. And as you'll see from the concept, there's rain gardens, bioswales included in this as well. So this is something we're absolutely doing.
Member Halinga?
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to hear that.
Member Beatty, please go ahead. Stu, go ahead.
Yeah, here we go. Adam, when you were getting the quote for the new parking lot, are you also getting a quote to put in a new gate and change the entrance?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair, we will have things built in that could be an option in the future. It's not something that's on the plans for this year, but it's being taken into consideration that it's an option.
I think somebody should check that gate because the last time I was down there, it looked like it was falling apart. If you're going to put a new parking lot in, you're going to have increased use, and I think you also want to have nighttime restrictions. So take a good look at a new gate, please.
Sorry about that. My apologies. There'll be a whole new entrance and new gate included in this. I thought you were talking about something else, Mr. Member Beatty. But yes, that will be a whole new entrance is part of this project.
And I believe if you check the master plan, you'll find that the parking lot was recommended very porous. If my memory serves me correctly, the report was like 6 inches thick. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Beatty. I do not see any other questions coming from anyone at this point. So is there anyone opposed to us approving this report and obviously the contract? Hearing none, thank you very much. Let us move on to our next report, which is FA 24-2022, the Draft Land Securement Strategy for 2022 to 2032. Member Smith, can I get you to move this report? And Member Halinga, can I get you to second this, please? Thank you. And I'm going to turn this over to our CAO. Please go ahead. We're going to go over to Director Yates. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to the presentation from Moorland Conservation this morning, the report before you outlines an overview of the land securement strategy that we had presented to you today. In terms of next steps, we are looking for your endorsement of this draft strategy, We will take it forward to our municipal partners and discuss how we can work together to support the objectives of this land securement strategy over the next 10 years. We will also look further into the funding mechanisms and opportunities for implementing this strategy. We will be reporting further to the board at the end of Q4 with the result of our consultation, and looking forward to your approval and final endorsement of the strategy and moving forward. So with that, myself and Natalie Green are available to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Director Yates. Are there any questions to staff at this point? Member Kaywell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The securement program costs, under the new regulations, are we able to levy the municipalities for the securement program costs?
Through you, Mr. Chair, land securement would fall under a Category 2 or Category 3 program and service. So yes, through our discussions with our municipalities on our programs and services, we'd be looking at whether this is something that would benefit them, and they'd be looking to request those services. And also, should it be a board direction for the land securement, we can also look at, through a Category 3, cost apportionment, if that would be the direction from the board.
Sorry, so the Category 2 and Category 3 are really negotiated between the NPCA and the municipalities?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So through our discussions on our inventory of programs and services, and also in looking at MOUs or service level agreements with our municipalities, this would be one of those services that would be on the table for discussion.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up question. In the past, we had, through the special levy, levied the municipalities for funds that were then put into a reserve account for land. And when the opportunity came up, we would use those funds to purchase the land. Under the new regulations, is that option still open to us?
I'm going to turn this over to the CAO, Member Kaywell. Go ahead.
The short answer through you, Chair, is yes, that option is still available. We have a reserve policy, we have a land reserve, and in the strategy, we've identified a range of financial mechanisms that we can use to augment or, build that land reserve. Thank you.
Sorry, no, it wasn't about the land reserve. It was about the ability to levy the municipality for an amount put into the reserve. That's what I was inquiring as to whether that option is still open to us. So.
That option, as Director Yates said, through you, Chair, will be through negotiations with municipal partners.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Chair. So.
Yep, thank you, Member Kaywell. Member McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Chair Foster. And I am so pleased that this report has come before us today. Something that if I saw nothing else done in my career, I would be quite happy. Just a couple of things I'd like to mention. Mr. Orland mentioned about caution, if I may use that word, about the administrative costs of acquiring properties based on size, and whether you acquired a 6-acre property or a 300-acre property, the administrative costs could be the same, could be similar. I do not argue with that fact at all. But what I would like to stress is that many properties that might be available to us, to the NPCA, represent what's the parallel to endangered species I refer to as endangered spaces. And that many of these endangered spaces only remain in Niagara, especially below the Niagara Escarpment, in small sizes. And that because there's few left, There's no big ones necessarily to choose from. The administrative costs should not be considered or given little consideration to the overall value of retaining or acquiring these endangered spaces, especially as they are close to urban centers and receive tremendous pressures. And Mr. Orland also mentioned how policies can change. So where we see a piece of property today that a policy might protect, the only true protection of that piece of land is by public ownership, whether it's through the NPCA or another related type agency, such as a land trust. So I did want to mention that. Mr. Orland, in his report, shows that 1.2% of the property or the land area in Niagara is owned by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. In his report, he writes that this is not very comparable or complementary to what the neighboring conservation authorities, that would be Hamilton and Halton or Grand, have as their ownership. Niagara has a long way to catch up, especially considering the lack of properties along the Niagara Escarpment that runs through our whole watershed. And if you remove just the Wainfleet Bog from our property listing, because that's our largest property, the Conservation Authority's ownership then falls well under 1% of the lands in Niagara. So I do hope, as Member K-Wall has attempted to steer this boat in the direction of budgets, priorities, a tremendous investment that municipalities in the region can make in Niagara in the future, is based on the ability to assist the Conservation Authority in acquiring lands. And I applaud the City of Hamilton for its annual contribution to land acquisition levy, and I hope that this can find a parallel in Niagara and in Haldimand. Thank you, Chair Foster.
Thank you, Member Mackenzie. Can I throw a question back at you just for a thought process? The Niagara Escarpment Commission has a significant swath of property that it follows down and through Niagara Peninsula, and as well we have Greenbelt in place. Do these two particular things, from your point of view, add to this discussion, or are they treated separate and aside? Because there are certainly a lot of conditions that come into play because of them. I'm just looking for your opinion, sir.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, are you turning the chair over while you ask your questions?
Sure, I can. Member Metcalf is now chairing.
Thank you. So go ahead, Chair Foster, ask your question.
So same question, just now I'm not in the chair. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yes. Through you, Chair Metcalf, to Member Foster, Chair Foster, and Member Foster. Thanks very much for that question. First, and it's just a term of definition of terms. The Niagara Escarpment Commission does not own any lands. It does, of course, manage the Niagara Escarpment Plan, or is responsible for that, which sets out policies as to how lands can be developed within the Niagara Escarpment Plan. The Greenbelt Act does the same thing, basically, on lands that are in the Greenbelt that are outside of the Niagara Escarpment Plan. And in Niagara, it does get confusing as to whether I'm in the Greenbelt or in the Niagara Escarpment Plan. As in Grimsby, as an example, lands south of Highway 8 or Main Street up to the Escarpment and Ridge Road are under the jurisdiction of the Niagara Escarpment Plan. Lands south of that and lands north of Highway 8 in certain sections of Grimsby are governed or subject to the planning document of the Greenbelt. But those are the policies that could change over time. As we know, the Greenbelt and the Niagara Escarpment Plan were reviewed by the province between 2015 2017, and that review takes place every 10 years. And whether these lands stay in the Greenbelt or stay in the Niagara Escarpment Plan is subject to the whim of the provincial government at the time, and also whether they stay in the plan, but also what the policies of those plans are will be under review. So that's my answer to your question, and that's again to emphasize why I feel it's important that these lands, where possible, in these planning areas are secured based on priorities, of course, subject to the securement strategy, are secured and put into public protection. I hope that answers your question, Chair Foster.
Thanks, Member Mackenzie. Member Foster, did that answer your question? Or Chair Foster, pardon me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll turn the chair back over to the chairman.
Okay, the chair is back in the chair. So we have Member Rapley and then we have Member Fior. Member Rapley, please go ahead.
I'm really encouraged, and I really think this report is phenomenal. And as you know, I was away in Muskoka earlier this week, and I was just a bit shocked that there's a 10-year plan, and I really think there should be some kind of an open spot reserved for the shoreline park. Now, we do have a 2-mile conservation area where we've just done a massive restoration project that's in process there. But this is a long-term thing that has had plenty of discussion with the Harmony Group and the town and Parks Canada going back with the Conservation Authority. And the new sewage lagoon, or the sewage lagoon area, the old sewage treatment plant is under the region, but it needs to be finalized exactly what's happening there. The new sewage lagoon or sewage treatment plant is really state of the art. I'm on the Environmental Advisory Committee, and we just had a tour several months ago of this facility, and there's a biodigest program, and it is really good. So the Shoreline Park, our responsibility comes up to Lakeshore Road for 2-mile, 3-mile, 4-mile creek, but we could be possible partners in the Shoreline Park, and I think it should be left in there for future discussions. Recently, the Harmony not a lot of things were happening with COVID for a few years, but the Harmony Group is active again, and I've joined their board for a year now. And basically, there's great interest in doing something. And then the town has great interest in off of what is called Ryerson Point now. There's a great interest in having a public beach there. But there's tremendous opportunities here for nature preservation, having hiking areas, restoration, and so on. And it is complicated because it involves the Department of Defense, it involves Parks Canada, it involves the region, it involves the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and of course the Conservation Authority should have great interest in this future project as it evolves. So with the financial problems recently documented with Parks Canada, there may be an opportunity to open up the negotiations and discussions here and bring things back to the table. Personally, I do a lot of birding down there, and the Shoreline Park is an amazing place, and there's a large marsh area there. There's great potential and great interest from the Niagara Falls Nature Club and the bird watching groups and so on for the area. So I just wanted to make sure that it didn't disappear from the list completely. There is great opportunity here in the next 10 years, I think.
Thank you, Member
Okay.
Rapp. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you,
Through
Member.
the chair, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Member Rapley, and I'm getting a nod from the CAO saying yes, it's definitely on the list. Member Fior, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm just wondering about that Q4 update that was just mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, and wondering if it will include terms of reference for the working group, maybe specifically including details about the composition of that working group, or is the goal to form a working group before the Q4 update? Thank you.
Director Yates.
Through you, Mr. Chair, our intention for this year is to finalize the strategy and start implementation next year. And definitely starting up the working group and looking at that terms of reference would be a priority at that point. Through our consultations and discussions with municipalities and yourself, with board members moving forward, if there is an interest to look at that terms of reference this year, we can definitely give that some consideration. However, the intent is we will move forward with the implementation once the strategy is approved and moving into the next year.
Member Fior?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that. So looking to 2023 for the terms of reference as part of the implementation. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Member Fior. Member Cridland.
Thank you, through Chair. On page 8, there's a mention of the regional municipality of Niagara and the discussions going on with staff. I'm not sure if this, who on staff might comment, but is there something more the board can do to facilitate the region participating in its own work on having a land securement strategy? Or would you see that maybe just falling out of the next, the implementation strategy by speaking with the municipalities? So just want to see if there's an opportunity for the board to do more to support that work at the region. Thank you.
I'm going to turn to the CAO for this one.
Through you, Chair, to Member Cridland, that's an excellent suggestion. Staff do their work at the staff level. I welcome the board support in working with Niagara region at the council level. We'll certainly welcome that. Thank you.
Member Cridland?
Through you, Chair, then if maybe there would be a suggestion, would that be either a motion or just direction to staff to maybe come back with something, either a letter or some kind of request directed at the region, and then we could look at that and perhaps endorse it at a convenient time at the next available meeting.
The CAO is nodding her head yes. So thank you very much.
Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Member Cridland. Member Mackenzie, I saw you had your hand up for a second time. Did you wish to say something?
Yes, and thank you, Chair Foster. And this Member Cridland stimulated a thought in my mind or a memory, and that in Niagara, the region does not have a parks board. Counties do, cities do, but I always find that this may be a missing piece in regions. Thus, it makes me think that there's an extra importance to conservation authorities where they work with regions, that they can share the responsibility of acquiring and managing natural areas and providing access to natural areas for our population by working through the abilities of the conservation authority. And this is something that's on my mind most of the time. I would just, that was the thought going through my mind, and thanks to Member Cridland for bringing this thought again to my mind. Thank you, Chair Foster.
Yes, thank you, Member McKenzie, and just the fact that mostly this type of thing would come through corporate services because it is treated as a financial matter at Niagara Region, but you are quite right. There is no parks group or that type of thing within the region. So that's a good point and worth further discussions. Does there anyone else have any questions? Oh, Member McKenzie, please go ahead.
Thanks. Just back to you, Chair, on that. You mentioned it comes to corporate services because it's a financial matter.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it went to public health because it's a health matter for me and most citizens. That's just my thought on that. So I'll leave that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Member McKenzie. That's a good idea. Anything else from anyone? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed to us having this approved draft land securement strategy? Thank you very much. Let us move on to committee reports. We have one committee report to receive today, and that's the Public Advisory Committee. Can I get Member Woodhouse to move, and can I get Member Fior to second that we receive the minutes from this particular meeting? Any questions? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much. We have no motions that have been provided. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, new business. We will start into our new business section. We'll begin with our CAO and her update for us. Madame CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I have a short list of items. Of course, staff have been really busy since our last meeting. We celebrated a successful 2021 year with a Staff Appreciation Day on June 7th. Thanks to Niagara Power, NPC Niagara Parks Commission for hosting us. It was a great day. Staff thoroughly enjoyed a barbecue here at Balls Falls and a visit to the power station. Second, NPCA has started next phase of Conservation Authority Act consultations with our municipal partners on programs and services. We had a good meeting with Haldimand Township with senior staff and CAO. This week, coming week, we have a meeting with Niagara Region, and following week with the City of Hamilton. And after we conclude those meetings, we'll be submitting our progress report to the province on the Conservation Authority Act transitions. My third update is an exciting one. At Binbrook Conservation Area last weekend, we had 10,000 people attend the famous Mud Girl event. I commend staff for managing that event really effectively and efficiently without any major incidents. Is that correct, Director Christie? Thank you. Thank you to our staff. That's a lot of people on over the weekend to our conservation area. My next one is with the launch of our annual report. We have been approached by newspaper and TV media outlets for interviews, and I've done 2, and they have gone really well. NPCA and Niagara-on-the-Lake team is collaborating really well on a historic issue in 4 Mile Creek area, where we had multiple complaints over the course of years about, erosion, water quality, all kinds of things, and staff have spent countless hours trying to address community concerns. Finally, the 2 organizations have come together. We have launched a geomorphic study. Our staff in watershed planning are working really well with the town staff. They've also did a media interview recently, and that project is going really well. Our staff, Natalie Green is our representative working with Niagara region on the upcoming Climate Change Summit on June the 28th. Several of our staff will be attending the summit with Niagara region and Brock University. Next, Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative annual meeting is in St. Catharines on June 20th, 22nd, and 24th. The theme is Powering the Blue Economy, and by blue economy really relates to water. NPCA will attend as an exhibitor to share the work we've done on the Remedial Action Program. We are also working finally with Conservation Ontario on the two major next initiatives through the Conservation Authority Act, requirements for transition, which is the development of a land management strategy, as well as a watershed resource management strategy. And we're collaborating on two working groups with Conservation Ontario to complete those in time for the transition. So there's a lot of work going on. Of course, you see a lot of reports are on the agenda of major accomplishments of staff. I really want to thank our staff team for putting in, really going beyond the call of duty every day to do it right and do a good job. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, CAO Sharma. Can I also add, I'm sorry, we got the climate summit coming up? Oh, yeah. So, and the reason that I'm bringing this up again is that, in fact, Mr. Metcalf was asking me about it this morning. So please make sure that you either, if you're interested, please have yourself signed up. It is both virtual and in person. So, and if you're not in person at this point and you would like to be, let me know. 28th, yes, it's the 28th.
It's by invite only, so we'll have to work on it.
What's that?
It's by invite only, so we'll have to work on it.
Any questions to the CAO? Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just had a general question. A few months ago, we were briefed on, and I'm going from memory here, but there was a realignment that was happening. I think we were briefed on it in about April, and there was talk of a new organization chart. I'm wondering if that organization chart is available, or if we know when we could expect it.
Through you, Chair, to Member Smith, yes, we are at the tail end of realignment process. Job descriptions are being updated for staff, and I will arrange to circulate the final org chart with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Smith. Member Rapley.
I just wanted to say that there's a lot of really good things that are happening, and Mother Earth Day at Fireman's Park last Saturday was a great event with lots of attendance and outdoor exhibits. And the NPCA had a nice display there. They also had a project where you could pot certain plants that were provided. There was also the Niagara River Remedial Action information there. The Niagara Nature Club had a booth. Niagara Parks had a display with lots of really good plants available for purchase. It was a great event, and I think it's a new event, and I was real pleased to see the NPCA there, and I think it'll be a good thing in the future. So it was what seemed to be very well attended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Rapley. Are there any other questions to the CAO? Seeing none, next item under new business is the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Foundation update. I'll just make a quick comment and then turn it to Member Cridlin. The foundation will be meeting July the 7th. a continuation of the foundation development of the new strategy in and around donations and sponsorships. That will be on the agenda at that point. As well, there has been some outreach to new members. So, Member Cridlin, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Two things. We do have our fundraiser
Can't hear
event
you,
now.
Member Cridlin.
Oh, thank you. Is that any better? Hello?
Oh, we're having some problems with you. Just a second. I mean, not with you personally. Just it's.
Testing.
Okay, try now, Donna.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good now.
Thank you. We have our the foundation now has its outdoor fundraiser event set, and it's going to be happening September 16th. It'll be a golf event. Certainly across all Niagara, outdoor events are selling out. So I'm hoping that this event will also sell out, and the details and the registration is now available on website. So tell your friends that that's going to be another opportunity to support the foundation and the NPCA work. And the second thing, based on what we saw today and the endorsement, the strong endorsement of the land securement, I'm going to again remind any board members that after this particular term, there's still a way to continue to serve. And if you are interested in perhaps considering a board position, there are still a couple of board positions. So I'll just leave that out there. There's lots of exciting momentum and fundraising ahead to help support the work of NPCA. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Cridland. And by the way, the golf tournament is going to be in Port Colborne, so Mayor Steele will be expecting to see you there. So no pressure. Is there any other business anyone wishes to bring up this morning? Member Kaywell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a follow-up, I believe, to the last meeting where I think you'd indicated you might be able to give us a view as to the future makeup of the board of the NPCA. Not that it's relevant to any of us, but I was just wondering if you have an update you might be able to share with us.
Thank you, Member Kaywell. The only thing that I can provide at this point in time is that there have been discussions going on between the CAOs, between the three municipalities, and I look forward to hearing more as well. It's a constant thing that I am reminding CAO Tripp at the region about, so thank you very much. Any other business this morning? I do not see any, and we do not have any closed session items this morning. So with that, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.